Do you know what the worst type of clutter is? I thought I knew what the worst type of clutter was, and I had a little theory, but I decided to ask my uh, social media followers, my friends on social media, what's the worst type of clutter? And I, w- it was surprising how what I consider was the worst type of clutter was what they consider was the worst type of clutter. And I realized, oh my goodness, I have barely talked about the worst types of clutter. And so I took their answers and I've categorized them into three categories, the three worst types of clutter. And it's interesting because it feels like the worst types of clutter, the reason we call it the worst is because they feel like it's the hardest type of clutter to deal with. I don't know. What do you think makes the worst type of clutter? But I would love, even before I reveal them to you, if you're listening to this, put it in the chat what you think are the worst types of clutter. But decluttering is not just about our stuff. In fact, some of the worst clutter is the invisible clutter in our life. But it's the type of clutter that is costing us the most. The hidden cost of clutter is it's stealing our time, it's stealing our energy, and it's stealing our peace. That might be the worst type of clutter is the clutter that steals our peace. So today I want to break down the three most damaging types of clutter and then how to finally get them cleared out of your life. And the last one probably will feel like it's the most difficult, but it's the one that has it's not any more difficult than the rest because clutter it in the big picture, the big scheme of things, clutter is just like when we're looking at physical clutter, it's actually representative of unmade decisions or lacking a system for dealing with it. This is why I say that creating a clutter free life starts with clarity, because the more that we have clarity, then the more crystal clear our definition of what actually is clutter is. That was a terrible sentence. But that clarity gives us our definition of clutter. Like, this is what's important to me. So then, by definition, these are things that are not important, but I probably was hanging on to them just in case out of fear that I might need it or it might be useful. But when we understand that one of the best things we can do is create more space in our life, whether that's time, energy, attention, even money, more space, more resources in our life to give to the things that matter most to us. It's like we'll take all the things that are vying for our time and attention, and we'll just keep on constraining them down so that we can focus and go more deeply on the things that matter most. And that is when we feel like instead of feeling too busy, we start feeling blessed. We start feeling like, I can finally have the time to enjoy my success. So, in case we're meeting for the very first time, my name is April Bragg, and I have this newsletter that I say brag about this, and I talk about different topics. In fact, I'll put the link in the description so you can sign up for it. But I help women and especially entrepreneurs simplify their homes, their lives, and their businesses so they can enjoy their success. Because when you're trying to do so many things and trying to do it well, it can feel overwhelming until we create the clarity and the simple systems that support us and feel like we're not, chasing our own tail all the time, being pulled in a thousand directions. So, anyway, today we're talking about the three worst types of clutter. So, does anybody have any guesses as you're showing up live of what's your worst type of clutter? I'd love to hear. Let me get a drink. Worst types of clutter. Any input? All right. So, number one, the one that seems to come up the most is mental clutter. It's crazy because I truly believe this, that our physical clutter is actually a manifestation of our mental clutter. But mental clutter is like negative thoughts, indecision, or that constant annoying to-do list in the back of our minds. You need to do this, you need to do that. It's mental clutter is the kind of clutter that keeps us up at night, or we wake up in the middle of the night and our mind starts racing. Is that something that you've ever experienced or something that you're experiencing now? Give me a 1 in the chat below. Give me a number 1 for mental clutter. But if mental clutter is something that you deal with, and I think it's something that we all deal with. Um, One of the reasons why we have a problem with physical clutter is because we have so much mental clutter, as in we have guilt about letting go of things that we may have spent a lot of money on, or we have fears that in the future maybe we won't have as much money as we do now. So maybe I need to hang on to it so I can save money. Or um, we just don't know. So we tend to we lack confidence, and so we tend to hang on to things. So mental clutter is also it's the fears that have us hanging on to things, but mental clutter is also have you ever wanted two things at the same time? Like, I wish this, but I also wish this. That's mental clutter. It's the cognitive dissonance of, here's a silly, but I think relevant uh, example. I want to lose weight, but I also want to eat chocolate cake anytime I want. That feels like mental clutter. It's the desire that you have, but also conflicting thoughts because you have other desires that are cluttering with it, that are fussing with it. So, how do we deal with mental clutter? I actually have a 3-step system for dealing with it. And I'm just going to go over it quickly because I am going to actually, I'm going to save it for the end so that I can see how much time I have to go into it. But it's a 3-step system that, if done consistently, it will actually make a difference in your sleep. It will start bringing calm into your life. You will start trusting that even though it feels like there's a lot coming at me, I actually have a simple 3-step system that I can employ anytime to clear out the mental clutter. So hang on to the end because I'm going to share it because it's actually a process that works well for the other 2 types of clutter too. Okay. So, worst type of clutter number 1, the mental clutter. Oh, by the way, I said mental and emotional clutter. I wanted to add this. Most of what we think is emotional clutter is not our emotions. Okay. Our emotions are not clutter. They are symptoms. So we have 60 to 70 thoughts a day, and some of those are really great thoughts, and some of those are clutter thoughts. But all of our thoughts kind of tie to and create an emotion. I always say that thoughts and feelings are 2 different sides of the same coin. So sometimes the coins are great, they're very useful, but sometimes they are painful or they create emotions that we don't like disappointment, loneliness, regret, fear, hesitation, those kinds of things, resentment, even. Our emotions, I cannot say this strongly enough, our most of our emotions are not clutter, even if we have a lot of them, even if we don't like, because our emotions are actually signals to help us find the thought. Now, the thought might be clutter, but the emotion's not clutter. Now, I did do a video on one type of emotion that I think is clutter, and that is vague or false guilt. So if you want to hear more about that, look for that video on my channel. Avoid the false guilt trap, I think is what it was called. But that is a clutter emotion. When it's just vague guilt, you're just feeling vaguely. But even then, you're going to want to deal with it in the same way, which is get to the clutter thought that is creating it. So the thoughts are the cause The emotion is the symptom. So if you're saying, well, I've got emotional clutter, I'm going to say you do not have emotional clutter. You have mental clutter that is creating emotions that um, feel like clutter, like these are emotions I don't want and I'd like to get rid of them. But we are humans. We are not androids. We are not, oh, dang it. I'm so embarrassed. We are not Spock's, whatever that, whatever he was. Somebody help me out of the chat on Star Trek. We are not emotionless beings where they purge their emotions. Our emotions are very useful signals. Our emotions are what give us flavor in life. So, the goal is not to get rid of the emotions. The goal is to transform our thoughts to better serve us. And those thoughts will then have the flavor, the signal of better emotions. All right. So, but our emotions are very, very helpful signals, is the way that I think about them. All right. So, that was number one, mental clutter. Number two is paper and digital clutter. It fascinates me that 20 years ago, digital clutter did not even exist. And now it feels like it's one of the worst types of clutter. And the reason it's one of the worst types of clutter is because, on one hand, it takes so little effort to just hang on to everything. It doesn't actually take physical space, but it annoys us because we can't find what we're looking for. Now, I will say this, search engines being what they're being, it's actually getting easier to deal with digital clutter because we can find what we're looking for. And because we can, when we have that trust that we can find what we're looking for, then we feel the confidence, the safety to let go of more. But paper and digital clutter, they kind of go hand in hand because one of the ways that I got rid of my paper clutter was by getting clear on what I could store digitally and securely, and also what was unnecessary to keep. So, dealing with paper and digital clutter is always what makes it pile up is the "I'll get to this later" syndrome, and then it starts to feel like it gets pretty heavy. I talked to one guy and he's said, yeah, I forget what we were talking about, unanswered emails, and he says, "Yeah, I have like 49K on his mailbox that says unanswered emails." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, number 1, I think that sometimes mail notifications or excessive notifications on our phone are definitely digital clutter. I do not need to be interrupted all the time by notifications. So turn those notifications off or choose very specifically which ones you want to keep. That's a form of digital clutter that we can get rid of pretty fast. But 49,000 notifications, that's going to create a feeling of heaviness of like, yeah, my time is not my own. I can never relax. I should do something about this. No, we are going to deal with paper and digital clutter. So, on the paper and digital clutter side, systems are the answer. And I go way more into this in the membership. This is something that, in fact, we're going to devote the entire month of April soon to paper and digital clutter because there's so much there, but we're going to set up simple systems that fit you. But one of the things that you can do on paper and digital clutter, it's all about the same system, the same process of getting clear on what is very, very important for me to keep on the paper side and what have I just been keeping out of habit. So getting clear on what's important and what's not, and then creating a simple system to make it findable. And then making sure you slow down the inflow of it in your life. That is a big one. Um, so, but to start with, maybe just take 5 minutes a day. One of the things that I love to do, in fact, once I just do this once a week. On my emails, I sort them all by sender. Okay. You know, who's it from instead of, when it came in. And then I can bulk delete fast, but I can also unsubscribe to anything that I don't want to have any more of. There's also different ways that you can send them into folders and things if you just want to keep them for reference. But this is just every week or every other week, I go through my emails and I'll have hundreds of emails by that time. But in 5 minutes, by sorting it by sender, and then unsubscribing and then deleting, big chunks like that, then I can get through my emails pretty fast. And then it keeps it pretty light. So I don't worry about getting to inbox zero or things like that every single day. I mean, that might be a great and a fun challenge to set yourself to, but this is what works for me. Minimum effort, maximum benefit. So I know that everything in there is less than 2 weeks old. All right. So paper and digital clutter. It's all about getting clear and then setting up powerful but very, very simple systems. The mistake that people make when they're dealing with paper and digital clutter is, well, getting too overwhelmed to start. We definitely in the membership help you overcome that obstacle. Um, and get you personalized help, but also making the system too complicated. If you'll notice, most times I try to get things down to just 3, 4, 5 steps because anything more and it just feels heavy. It feels hard to do. It becomes mental clutter instead of a practice tool that we can use. So, paper and digital clutter. It feels terrible. It feels messy. But when we start relying on our systems to support us, it'll make a huge difference in your life. So now let's go on to number 3, the third worst type of clutter. And I call these OPS, OPS, other people's stuff. Holding on to things for others or having feeling like there's constant expectations that others are feeding to you that you're trying to deal with, or in a shared household, tripping over other people's stuff. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how I just laugh at this every time. Other people's clutter annoys us way more than our clutter does. I remember when I first started doing office work, I did not understand how to create systems, and so I had a cluttered desk for a long time. But it didn't bother me too much. I kind of knew where everything was. But then once I started getting organized and I had a system and I was able to find things even faster, I started to appreciate it. I started getting annoyed at my boss because he would drop his clutter onto my space or put it in my space to where it was visual clutter. I could see his stuff. And then I would get distracted from what I was doing and I would keep on going up over to the file cabinets and looking at all of those piles. And I'd be like, oh, that's his. Oh, that's his. Oh, that's his. Like one pile might be mine, but the rest were his. And I started getting a really bad attitude about it. Like, oh my goodness, I can't concentrate because I keep on forgetting, what's in those stuff. Finally, this is what I had to do. I had to cease putting my stuff anywhere near his stuff. So I created a new spot, like this is my pile of, I'm going to get to this after lunch or whatever. And in my mind, anything that landed on the file cabinets that were next to me, but within my visual sight, that was his stuff. And therefore, I didn't have to worry about it. So I created this mental boundary of that's his, not mine. I don't need to keep on getting up and looking, seeing which is mine and which is his. I just kind of sorted it and made it. This is how we do other people's stuff. So this is a hot, hot topic for families. When you have kids, when you have spouses that are not as organized as you, when you are struggling to get organized, and then it feels like nobody is cooperating with you. And believe me, I have so much sympathy and compassion for this because I remember what it was like, and I remember how hard it truly is to try to figure out how to get organized yourself. And when you're trying to figure it out, but having somebody else whose stuff is adding to the chaos and being a distraction. So, let me give you a couple of different tips that I hope will help you. Number one, with the added encouragement, listen, this is what we really dive into. In fact, I do a weekly call in the private paid membership where we get very specific about you and your situation and even the words that you might say or exactly where you would set up systems or how you would implement without ever thinking negatively or blaming the other person. I think that's very, very important because we're until we all learn how to handle clutter, we all have a problem with clutter. So it's not something to feel shame about, and it's not something to feel constantly defeated about. And we certainly don't want to feel like we're trapped in resentment over other people's stuff. So if that's describing you, I just want you to know that there's no judgment and there's just exactly the specific support you need to help you deal with other people's stuff. But here's some of the things that we can do. Number one, own this. Everybody that lives in the house or in your office deserves a place to call their own. So everybody does need a place to call home, to call their space, to put their stuff in. So in a large enough home, this means that everybody would have their own bedroom or their own designated space. But if it's a shared bedroom, maybe you're married, then it's like, well, this is my nightstand, that's his nightstand. Or this is, if it's a very tiny space, this is my bookshelf, this is your bookshelf, this is somebody else's bookshelf. But somehow, some way, we want to honor the person and their things and also honor you and your stuff by giving you a designated home. Everybody should have the gift of a place to call home. Designated, their private personal spot. So that's the principle number one. Then principle number two is we're just going to train everybody to keep their stuff in their spots. So that might require reminders. Sometimes that it's easier for me to take somebody's stuff and put it back in their spot than it is for me to wait for them to move it out of my spot, or gentle reminders. This is where consistency, persistence, and patience will really pay off. The more calm that we can keep on implementing this new system and maintain our peace, the more effective and the faster people will pick up on. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not. I'm saying it can be simple and it can be doable, and then it'll become habit eventually. Everybody can learn a new habit, okay? The key is to not feel frustrated in this process of simple, doable until it's a habit. All right, so um, other people's stuff, expectations. So this is interesting because on other people's stuff, sometimes the greatest work when we're talking about other people's stuff is identifying who this actually belongs to. So say you feel like there is somebody's giving you an expectation, that people are putting expectations on you. That is we sort that out by getting clarity too. As in what is mine and what is not mine. I remember also when I was working at this one place, I when I hired on to the job, I remember saying to my prospective employee, I was looking for part-time work, and he says, "Well, we're only hiring for a full-time position." And I said, "Okay, I'm willing to do that, but I am not willing to." I was wanting part-time. I do not need full-time, do not desire full-time. My weekends are for my family. I am not. And he's like, "Well, would you be willing to work maybe some weekends?" And I said, "Truly, if I'm working full-time, I'm not willing to work any weekends." I just wanted him to know that up front. And he said, "Okay." And after I've been there a couple of months, he's like, "I don't think it'd be a big deal if you could just agree to work one weekend a month." And it's like, no, no. But it was so hard for this recovering people pleaser to say no to my boss. But I had to remember, listen, I set the expectation here and you're trying to change it. And that's okay. Whatever you think about my no is up to you. But when I said working full time, that was major. That was a major commitment. And the only way I can make that major commitment was by saying, my family will get all of me on the weekends. And so if I give in to this, your expectation, then I'll feel resentful, which means that I will not bring my best work, which means that we both lose in the end. I'm going to hate this job and quit, and I'm not going to be a pleasant employee. You're not going to get the best of me. So, when we are feeling like somebody's expecting of us, this is such a prime example of a place where we get to notice that is another person's clutter. Somebody else's expectation of us is their expectation. They can decide, but we don't have to adopt somebody else's clutter. Put that back into their space. Like pick that up and put that back on them. Don't don't make it your problem that you have to solve. I hope that helps. But here's the exercise that will help with the mental clutter. I talked about this at the beginning. I said I was going to share the three-step thing, and this will also help with the other people's stuff. The emotional clutter that comes from the emotional feelings that come from saying no to other people's expectations, even if we say it no mentally. All right, this will help get it really clear because our clarity defines what is clutter. Step number one. Oh, by the way, let me say this before I give you this method for dealing with mental clutter on a regular basis. I do want to say this that the more you practice this exercise, the more benefit you'll get to it. So, if you even get to the point where you're practicing this on a daily basis, then you will notice a huge difference when you go to bed if you're the type that has, the mind that wants to worry about things. Maybe you've been going busy all day long and then you go down to sleep. And that's when your mind wakes up and says, "Oh, have you thought about this and this and this and this and this and this?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to sleep." Or you do fall asleep and then you wake up and your mind starts racing again. This is the exercise that I developed to solve that problem that I had in my own life. And now I want to share it with you. Okay, so here are the three steps. Number one, you're going to do a brain dump. As in, just take 5 minutes, write down anything and everything that's on your mind. It doesn't matter. Just write, write, write. See if you could write for the whole 5 minutes. If you're not done writing at the end of 5 minutes, it actually would benefit you to keep on writing, but just kind of like make it a bullet point, like this is on my mind, this is on my mind. And just what we're doing here is it's like we don't, when it comes to mental clutter, it just feels cluttered, but we're finding all the clutter. So it's kind of like we're gathering all of it together into one big pile. So we're corralling the clutter into one area. Okay. That's what we're doing with this brain dump. So, but we're putting on a piece of paper, getting it out of here where it can, hold 200 to 300 pieces of, random thoughts maybe. And we're putting on a piece of paper. 5 minutes is usually long enough to do it. Okay, now that you've got that list of paper, step number two is you're going to ask three Very, very simple questions. The first question is, what's important? That's it. Now, somebody's going to say, what do you mean, what's important? No, I would just want you to know what's important. Like your brain is trying to worry you to death about something. What's important? Either what's important to remember, what's coming up, what's important here? What's important? Okay, and then just write that down. This is what's important. Question number 2. What's important now? Now, this brings, it's not just important, but it might feel like it's urgent. So, what's important? We started with the brain dump, then we kind of moved it in, and it's like, what's important here? Now, what's important now? What's what's the one thing? What's important now? If we were just going to focus on one thing, what's important now? Because we can only do one thing at a time. We're not great at multitasking. So just what's important now? And then the third question is, what's the next step? What's one simple, tiny action step that you can take? When you answer these 3 questions, you are giving your brain a very specific pathway to creating a plan. And when you get down to the point where you can take action, what's the next step? That's the action question. Then it's almost like your brain's like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do. And then step number 3 in this framework is just to schedule that step. As in, you might be doing this exercise in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. so that you can go back to sleep. Well, maybe the next step is I need to call my lawyer, or I need to call my tax accountant, or I need to fill out this form, or whatever that next step is. Don't get up and do that. Come on. Just schedule it. When tomorrow am I going to do this thing? Or when is the best time to when's a good time to do this thing? Don't ask the best time, because then your brain will get revved up again trying to figure out what's the very, very best and most efficient and most, beneficial time. No, no, no. What's a time? When will I do this? So you just created a plan, and then you made a plan to do your action. Your brain is going, it's like it closed a loop. And now you'll have a chance to rest because it feels like you just took care of the mental stuff. Does that make sense? Any questions about that 3-step framework? It's one of my favorites. And this is something that can be done every single day if you want to, especially if you're prone to worrying about things that you can't actually do things about, or if you feel like you're bouncing in between too many projects or taking on other people's stuff and neglecting your own. This is a really beautiful refocusing tool. Okay. And this is something that, again, we talk about more in our membership or in that I teach my one-on-one clients. But which I do want to ask you this question, put it in the chat below. Which of these types of clutters do you struggle with the most? So I can't wait to hear. Is it number 1, mental clutter, number 2, paper and digital clutter, or 3, other people's stuff? And I do want to say that very soon, I think it's next week or the following week. Sorry, you guys, I don't have the date right at the top of my mind. If you're ready to learn how to declutter once and for all, I've got a free workshop coming up. It's called From Chaos to Calm: How to Create the Home You Love. The link is in the description, but in it, I go deep into my declutter fast method, which is 4 steps to teach you how to declutter any area of your home or your life in 15 minutes or less. It's very, very simple, but it's based upon principles, so it applies to a broad range. And then also in the workshop, I can help you. I can answer any questions that you might have or give you coaching on any area that you're not sure, what's important and what's clutter. So we work on the clarity piece. So that free workshop is coming up. Make sure you get on the list. Even if you can't join it live, I will send out a replay, but I only send it out to those that sign up for it. So make sure you get signed up for that. But if you want help immediately, I do have a private membership that you can start accessing all the help you want immediately. And that link, I'll put that in the description also. But final thought, listen, decluttering isn't just about having a clean home, a clean space. This is not so that we can all, look like Rachel Ray's and Martha Stewart's or, having, even though, listen, I am all about creating a home that you love and that reflects you and your style and feels like a sanctuary to you. It's not about decluttering, is about having a clear mind, a focused life, and a home and schedule that truly, truly serves you. So I hope that helps you see hope and possibility and the steps that you can take to start clearing out the clutter in your life to make room, an abundance of room, an abundance of time and energy and mental space for the things that truly matter the most to you. All right. I'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.